So, here's a huge question. Can a president use the National Guard as a domestic police force without getting a green light from Congress? Well, a federal court just dropped a bombshell ruling on that very question, all tied to former President Trump. And let me tell you, this decision really shakes things up, challenging over a century of legal thinking. Let's break it all down.
And just so we're clear, this is not some minor technical thing that only lawyers care about. No way. This decision is sending some serious shockwaves through both legal and political circles. It strikes right at the heart of presidential power, specifically digging into this thing called the Insurrection Act. Look, understanding this is super important because it's essentially redrawing the line between military authority and civilian law.
At its core, the whole case really boils down to this one question. When does something like a protest or civil unrest cross the line and become a rebellion that actually justifies bringing in the military? This ruling takes a hard look at whether a president can just make that call all on their own, or if they absolutely need that explicit go-ahead from Congress.
Okay, so first up, let's look at what the court actually decided and, why all the legal experts are calling this such a landmark moment. Almost immediately, legal experts started calling this a significant legal precedent. And that's not just some fancy lawyer speak. What it really means is that for the first time, a federal court has put some pretty firm limits on the president's power under the Insurrection Act of 1807. This decision, it's going to be the foundation for legal arguments for years, maybe even decades to come.
So what makes this so groundbreaking? Well, it directly challenges this long-held idea that the president has a ton of leeway in a crisis. The court is basically arguing that unless there's a clear, undeniable act of rebellion, using military force against your own citizens violates something called the Posse Comitatus Act. It's a fundamental reevaluation of that entire line of authority.
It probably won't surprise you that a ruling this big set off an immediate and very sharply divided reaction from the politicians. Yeah, the political fallout was instant. On one side, you have Republicans who, for the most part, celebrating the decision. They see it as a necessary check on executive power, something that protects states' rights. And on the other side, you've got Democrats condemning the ruling, warning that it could seriously hamstring a future president's ability to handle a genuine national crisis. This ruling has really forced two huge debates right back into the spotlight. The first one is all about the role of the military in our own cities. When is it okay, and when is it not? And the second is that classic constitutional tug-of-war. Who really has the final say? Is it the president who commands the military, or is it the Congress that actually writes the laws? Now, if you step away from the political shouting match, there's an equally fascinating and just as divided debate happening among the country's top legal minds. Among the legal scholars, the split is just as deep, but they're arguing about a slightly different question. They're asking, is this ruling a brave defense of our civil liberties, or is it a kind of naive decision that just ignores the harsh realities of national security? And here are the two main camps. One side says the court did the right thing, that it just clarified the laws we already have, reinforcing the idea that military power needs clear democratic checks. But the other side argues this sets a really dangerous precedent, creating a legal gray area that could be exploited by real threats to the nation. So, with all this disagreement and high-stakes drama, the big question is pretty obvious. Where do we go from here?
One thing's for sure, this ruling is not the end of the story. Not even close. You could say it's just the opening bell in a legal and political fight that is really just getting started.
So what's that fight going to look like? Well, the path forward is actually pretty clear. We're at step 1 right now with the current ruling. Step 2 will almost certainly be appeals. That's a given. Those appeals will work their way up the judicial ladder until, and a lot of experts think this is where it's headed, we get to step 3, a potential showdown at the Supreme Court.
And the long-term stakes here, they're absolutely enormous. How this all gets decided in the end is going to affect everything, from how a future president handles a natural disaster or a major protest, to how Congress writes national security laws for the next generation. It could literally alter the balance of power in Washington. Ultimately, this whole case forces the country to grapple with one of the oldest and toughest questions in any democracy, and there are definitely no easy answers. It all comes down to this: where exactly is the line between a nation's security and its own laws?